6 months ago, King Charles revealed he had cancer, a devastating diagnosis for a man in his 70s, and it came just 16 months into his reign. But today, while he has not had the all clear and is not out of the woods yet, there is great optimism. This is the inside story on how the King was put back together again, and it's a story of COVID-style restrictions, pioneering cancer treatment, and even him choosing to eat lunch for the first time in his life. And as one source close to Charles tells me, the sun wasn't shining in February, but it is now. It's worth going back to those dark, dark days where the sun wasn't shining in February, where the King was taken to hospital and he said that he had cancer. This came right at the same time as the Princess of Wales was also in hospital. There were many fears for the King. Would he last? How much longer would he survive? Would we need a Prince Regent? Would his reign be doomed? Immediately, the royal household sprung into action. He was pulled from duty, he was pulled from frontline duty, not because he couldn't do the job, but because there were fears about getting secondary infections. He was having cancer treatment, so he needed to be kept away from people just in case he caught any other infections or any other diseases. Now this meant he spent a lot of time in the countryside. He would be up in Sandringham and then would only come in for his weekly cancer treatment. Camilla even said to him he had to slow down, and Charles is known as a workaholic. Despite being pulled from public duty for many, many weeks, he actually managed to spend more time working by having all this spare time to read his red government boxes. But around this time, the aides were sent into a bit of a flap because Prince Harry, his son, jetted over from the United States to the UK to see his father. This was seen as a gesture at the time of Harry wanting to be close to the King. He wanted to be close to his father and really see how he was. But Harry was restricted for 30 minutes. The reason behind this was because of the restrictions that the royal household and the doctors had put in place. They didn't want someone flying 5,000 miles from the United States carrying all sorts of infections, all sorts of possible infections, and being close to the King when his health levels were low due to his cancer treatment. In fact, he was even banned from joining his father at Sandringham. As one aide said to me, they feared they would never get rid of him. In the early weeks, COVID-style tiers were introduced to ease the King back to work. We all remember during the COVID era where we were told we could only socialise with small groups of people, and that is exactly what they did with the King. They gradually increased the number of groups, they gradually changed the tiers to allow the King to meet wider public and larger members of the royal household. It is also similar to what was carried out by the royal household for the late Queen, which was called Operation Bubble during the COVID restrictions, where there was only about 24 people at any stage that were allowed to be anywhere near her to reduce the risk of infection. So as the treatment worked and as the risk of infection diminished, the COVID-style tiers changed. This meant in April, he actually got out to meet lots of members of the public at Easter Sunday at Windsor Castle. I think I counted around 60 members of public that the King was allowed to greet, shake hands with and talk. And this was a huge change. Other elements of the COVID-style tiers which changes, for instance, when he got to meet the Prime Minister. He got to spend time with Rishi Sunak where they had a nice chat, and he got to spend more time outside of London staying at other properties opposed to only Sandringham in Norfolk. By mid-April, by this time that he had actually gone out and met members of the public, the King was so confident his treatment was going well that he ordered aides to supercharge his diary, and he demanded that the Australia tour that will go ahead this October will happen. It was the King that said he would return to duty, and it was the King that said he was well enough to go to Australia. After the success of the Easter Sunday event, the King returned to frontline duty. However, while he has been out working, meeting members of the public, there has been an extra restriction placed on the King where he can only meet members of the public for 5 hours a day. And again, this is just one of a number of the COVID level style tiers that are put in place for his own health and safety. This restriction to 5 hours a day will continue while he is on tour in Australia in October. During the summer, the King also got to travel to France. Now this was a surprise to many people because it involved international travel and meeting people from another country. Interestingly, he actually had his weekly cancer treatment the day before he set off to the beaches in France. The royal household did actually change his schedule while he was in France to deal with the fact that he was still undergoing cancer. He didn't attend the final event on the final day because they wanted to get him back to the UK because previously this event had overrun. However, later in Jersey and Guernsey, where he did spend 2 days working with Camilla in the Channel Islands, many of these engagements did overrun and made people a little bit nervous. Throughout the last 6 months during his cancer treatment, I'm told that one of the most important aspects for the King is keeping a positive frame of mind. And he has always been optimistic, and he has always held engagements in his mind in the future that he knew that he'd want to attend, including making sure he gets to Australia. The role of the Royal Medical Household's Michael Dixon and his complementary therapy is also said to be key. One of the things that the King has changed in the past 6 months, and he has been urged by his wife Camilla, who's been by his side much of the time, is to change a tradition that he has always adhered to his entire life. And he's actually started eating a light lunch for the first time in his life, even though he admits himself that he has lost his sense of taste. Of course, one of the key aspects for getting the King back on his feet is the cancer treatment. He has been having weekly cancer treatment in London, and it's been described to me as pioneering and non-intrusive. Now, this is targeted treatment. I'm told that there has been a quiet revolution in cancer treatment in the UK, and the King has been one of the beneficiaries. When we say targeted treatment, we say that it's less of a blitzkrieg effect on the body and more finding out where the actual treatment needs to go and targeting properly. Now, this has limited the side effects. I think you will see the King in the last couple of months. He has not, for instance, suffered any hair loss, and he has been buoyed by the fact that his side effects have been less as a result of this pioneering new treatment. Of course, as anybody who has a family member who has gone through cancer, the importance of family has been key. And it was told to me that when his wife Camilla visited him in hospital, she would go there every night to have lunch with the King before she went home. And as someone quite close to the King at the time said to me, #WifeGoals. But also the Princess of Wales has been very closely speaking to the King quite a lot, and they had lunch several times at Windsor Castle, and the King would meet William every Sunday at Windsor Castle for a father and son chat. There has been many questions as to what type of cancer the King has. Now, there are currently no plans to reveal this diagnosis. We know the general area. We know that it was found while his doctors were treating him for an enlarged prostate, but we are told it is not prostate cancer. Now, he will continue not to tell anybody what his diagnosis is, as he wants to represent patients of all cancers rather than just be pigeonholed for one specific cancer. After 6 months, as I said, the King is full of optimism, but he isn't out of the woods yet. He hasn't had the all clear, but the Australia tour will go ahead, and as anyone who knows anything about Australia, the sun will definitely be shining there.